So those are the different types of ethanol fireplaces. This is probably the wording that we have. So they are classified in 5 different types. You've got burners, fireplaces or ready built-in fire solutions, freestanding units, so non-permanent features, fire pits, and fire tables. So burners, for the longest time, have been the most popular range due to the fact that it is where you have the most flexibility in terms of finishing materials and also viewing applications. So this is what you could achieve with an ethanol fireplace. So obviously, as I just mentioned previously, the longer or the bigger you go in terms of burner, the more heat it will generate. So you have to select, different, like the size of the burner to be able to have sufficient heat in the room where you intend to place this fireplace. We also have different types of burners that would also give a different type of flame. So you can have something like XL series burners which provide you with a low profile flame, or you can have those round burners that provide you with a high flame. So I'll power through those slides, and after I'll show you some installation examples and also the reasons why they chose those materials and what needed to be considered in terms of design. So please stop me if I'm not clear enough. So as I mentioned previously, the burners need to be installed in a fixed position, also in a non-combustible material only. So you cannot design a fireplace cavity out of a combustible material, which is pretty logical. And also it needs to be secured in position, and you have to respect minimum clearances depending on the size of burner you select. The way we computed that information is basically we sorted the information onto whether you want to create a single-sided cavity or an open flame. A single-sided cavity is something like that, so basically quite traditional. You enclose the fireplace in your wall unit, and you can see that depending on the size of the burner, you have different clearances. Usually the clearance remains the same in terms of height and depth, but the width or length differs. So the usual depth requirement would be 350 mil and 500 mil in height. The length changes anywhere from, let's say, 650 all the way to 1.5 meters. If you want to design something fully open, there are different clearances. So basically, what's important for you is the clearance to the nearest combustible material. So you need to leave a minimum radius of 600 mil. So you cannot have a combustible material such as furniture or frame like closer than less than 600 mil away from your fireplace. Also, in terms of height, so if you don't recess something from the level of the fireplace, you have to leave a minimum height of 1.5 meters and 2 meters in an outdoor environment. This is due to the fact that you can have, such as trees and branches that might move in an outdoor space. That's the reason why we increased the clearance from 1,500 to 2,002 meters. Another thing that's quite important is that to be able to comply with the European norm, just so you know, all manufacturers need to supply their burners with trays. So trays can be called differently. Top trays for us, insulation trays for others. Basically what they do, the purpose of that is to provide additional insulation around the burner and underneath. So there's no heat convection at the base or under the cabinet. So basically, You only need to create a cutout to the dimensions of the burner, of the tray, sorry, and the burner sits into the tray. All right. So this is an installation example that was done in New York, in the US. What I want to point out is that for many years, and it's also very trendy at the moment, is that the finish materials that specifiers use, especially in a joinery unit, is timber veneer, solid timber. I want to point out that the fact that you have to watch out for those materials, as the nature of them, they are combustible, so you will need to treat them to be able to bring some heat resistance under constant heat. So you can use a polyurethane finish or a two-pack finish so that they would resist under heat. However, it is never the best finish material to use because it could dry out over time, and we actually don't know how it resists. It's not a long-lasting type material. What was done here is they placed a minimum height of 500 in a double-sided environment, and the burner was fixed into a natural stone base. So this specific fire pit was installed in countryside Victoria, in a hospitality venue called Junction Wama. What's quite interesting there is they placed 3 burners in the shape of a star. They recessed them into pebbles, and they raised the fire pit on the stone plinth. So basically the idea of the landscape architect there was to have a feature that could be shown at the eye level, because people spend most of the time standing next to the fire pit, so that's why it was raised. They also added a round fire screen, so this is very good to add, especially if you leave it in an outdoor space in a windy environment. It would control the flame better. Also a concern in commercial environments, such as this lobby in a hotel in Japan, is that they want to know how much they can enclose an ethanol fireplace. The major difference that you might have between a gas wood fireplace and an ethanol fireplace is that somehow they need to remain partially open. So you can enclose it on the sides, on the back, also you can have a bulkhead above, but the front section needs to be somehow open. In a way, I say somehow because you can add a screen, a guard at the bottom with an air gap, but that cannot be closed all the way up. And also another reason why you cannot free enclose it is because you still need to access the burner to be able to refill it. So usually in a cavity that's about 500 mm high, you cannot go higher than 300 in height because you need enough space to access the burner that way. So this was also done in Japan, but what I want to show you is that you could create a feature in a lobby environment, for instance. What they did here is quite clever. Basically, they hid a structural column with toughened mirror, and instead of just doing that, they created a feature out of it. So they placed burners side by side on a concrete hearth, and they put an ancient bell for a design element to it. What's often done as well is many specifiers create a room divider wall with a double-sided or single-sided fireplace that includes this column, so it's actually hidden in the feature. Most of the time, the inquiries we get for residential projects is that people like having a fireplace and a TV above. So this is what you could achieve. This one was done in California. So they recessed several burners side by side. But basically you can see something here. You can notice that the TV is actually recessed is sitting back from the level of the flame. So you understand what I'm leading to. I'm leading to how to place a TV above the fireplace, net on the fireplace. You cannot do something like the first sketch due to the fact that as the fireplace is open, if you wall mount a TV right above that, the material of the TV will be affected by the heat. So you need to recess it either into a niche or into a mantle that would act as a heat shield. The last sketch might be probably the best solution due to the fact that you have more air circulation at the back of the TV. But this is up to you. It also depends on your client if they like having a cavity created, a niche recessed in the wall or not. The usual distance that we always recommend between the top section of the fireplace and the bottom of the TV is 300 mil. The reason is because when we did our temperature testings, we realized that at the flame level, the ethanol burners generate heat for about 700 degrees. The back wall is at about 260 degrees. The material at underneath the bulkhead is anywhere between 200 to 180. And at the top section of the fireplace, then it drops down anywhere from 100 down to 60 degrees. So basically, if you allow a 300 mil distance, usually you're pretty safe in a way that the temperatures will be dropped significantly. You can also do something like that. So this was done in Hong Kong, and what's interesting there is that the designer had to add an additional insulation layer at the bottom of the cabinets to be able to operate the burners while the cabinet was open, watching TV or not. So you have this option there, but this is something that is also important when designing those type of concepts. So usually the material used under the bulkhead is a metal sheet, stainless steel, and lined up with fiber cement boards, for instance.